The stars had never looked so cold. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching the emergency fleet reports scroll across her command screen. Each red dot that disappeared represented another human colony lost to the Zaphiran war machine. In 3 years, humanity had gone from controlling 47 worlds to defending just one. Earth. Admiral, the Council is requesting an immediate briefing. Her aide, Lieutenant Morrison, said quietly. Chen nodded, without taking her eyes off the tactical display. The Zaphirians had superior technology, superior numbers, and superior strategy. What humanity had was stubbornness and the desperate will to survive. It had not been enough. The holographic projector hummed to life, showing the worried faces of the Federation Council. President Martinez looked like he had aged 10 years in the past month. Defense Minister Wang's usual calm had cracked, revealing the fear they all shared. Admiral Chen, President Martinez began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. What is our current status? Not good, Mr. President. Chen activated the star map, showing enemy positions in red. The crimson tide had swept across human space like a disease. Our intelligence suggests the Zaphirians are massing their entire remaining fleet for a final assault on the Sol system. Conservative estimates put their force at over 300 ships. Silence filled the bridge. Everyone knew what that meant. Earth's defensive fleet consisted of 38 vessels, including the Indomitable. The math was simple and brutal. How long do we have? Defense Minister Wang asked. 72 hours before they reach the outer system. Maybe 96 if we get lucky with their jump calculations. President Martinez leaned forward. And our evacuation efforts? The civilian transports are loading as fast as possible, but we need time. At least a week to get everyone off Earth and the inner colonies. The cargo ships can carry maybe 2 million people per trip, but they move slowly and need escort protection. Council Member Harrison, representing the Outer Rim territories, spoke up. What about negotiation? Perhaps we can buy time with talks. Chen almost laughed, but the sound that came out was bitter. The Zaphirians don't negotiate. They've made that clear on every world they've taken. Complete surrender or total destruction. Those are the only options they offer. The council members exchanged glances. They all knew what Admiral Chen was really saying. The evacuation transports were slow, defenseless, and needed time to reach the jump points. Time they did not have. There is one possibility, Chen said slowly. A delaying action. If we could hold the Zaphirian fleet at the system's edge even for a few days, it might give the transports enough time to escape. With what force? Minister Wang demanded. Our entire fleet against 300 enemy ships? It would be suicide. Not our entire fleet, Chen replied. Just one ship, the Indomitable. The bridge went completely silent. Chen could hear the soft hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of the ship's massive engines. Her crew had stopped their work to listen. Admiral, President Martinez said carefully, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? The Indomitable is the most powerful ship in our fleet. Heavy armor, redundant systems, and the best crew in human space. If any ship could hold off the enemy long enough to matter, it would be this one. Against 300 ships? Council Member Harrison's voice cracked. That's not a delaying action, Admiral. That's a death sentence. Chen looked around her. Bridge. These men and women had served with her for 3 years. They had fought in every major battle of the war. They had seen friends die and worlds burn, but they had never given up. Sometimes that's what duty requires, she said simply. The argument that followed was predictable. The council spoke of other options, of miracle weapons that did not exist, of alien allies who had already fallen to the Zaphirians. They spoke of everything except the truth that hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Finally, President Martinez called for a vote. The decision was unanimous. Operation Last Stand was approved. Chen closed the communication channel and turned to face her bridge crew. 8,000 souls served aboard the Indomitable. 8,000 people who had families, dreams, and futures. 8,000 people she was about to ask to die. All hands, this is the Admiral, she announced over the ship's communication system. "We have received new orders from Federation Command. The Indomitable has been selected for a special mission. All department heads report to Conference Room Alpha in 30 minutes. Admiral out." She walked to her private office behind the bridge and sat down heavily in her chair. On her desk was a picture of her daughter Emma, taken just before the war started. Emma would be 15 now, probably evacuating with the other children on one of the transport ships. If Chen did her job right, Emma would live to see 16. The meeting with the department heads was harder than the council briefing. These were people Chen had worked with for years. Chief Engineer Martinez, who could make the ship's engines sing. Weapons Officer Kim, who could put a torpedo through a window at 10,000 kilometers. Medical Chief Dr. Reeves, who had saved more lives than anyone had a right to expect. Chen laid out the mission parameters without sugarcoating anything. The Indomitable would jump to the Kepler 442 system, where the Zaphiran fleet was staging. Their job was simple: cause as much damage as possible and keep the enemy busy for as long as possible. "How long are we talking about, Admiral?" Chief Martinez asked. "Best case scenario? 3 days. More likely 2, possibly less." The room fell quiet. Everyone understood that Chen was talking about the rest of their lives. "What about escape pods?" Dr. Reeves asked. "Evacuation procedures?" "The Zaphirians don't take prisoners," Chen replied. "They never have. We go in knowing we're not coming back." Weapons Officer Kim leaned back in his chair. "Well, if we're going to die anyway, we might as well take some of them with us." The dark humor broke some of the tension. "Chief Y?" Martinez nodded slowly. "The crew deserves to know what they're volunteering for. This can't be an order, Admiral. It has to be a choice." Chen had been thinking the same thing. "Agreed. Anyone who wants to transfer off the ship has 12 hours to do so. No questions asked, no black marks on their record. They can join the defensive fleet protecting the evacuation transports." Over the next 12 hours, Chen watched the transfer requests come in. She expected hundreds. Instead, she got 47. 47 people out of 8,000 chose to leave. The rest stayed, knowing exactly what that choice meant. The farewells were the hardest part. Chen made time to speak personally with each crew member who was transferring. Most were young officers with families. She shook their hands and told them they had served with honor. She meant every word. The crew that remained worked with a quiet efficiency that impressed even Chen. They loaded every weapon the ship could carry. They reinforced critical systems. They recorded messages for families and loved ones, digital letters that would be transmitted just before the final battle began. Chief Engineer Martinez performed miracles in the engine room, pushing the ship's power output beyond safe limits. "If we're only going to use it once," he told Chen, "might as well get everything we can out of it." Dr. Reeves stockpiled medical supplies and set up emergency surgery stations throughout the ship. She knew she would be treating wounded crew members right up until the end. The weapons crews practiced loading drills until they could reload the main guns in their sleep. Every torpedo tube was loaded, every missile rack was full, every energy capacitor was charged to maximum. 24 hours before departure, Chen held a final ceremony in the ship's main hangar. The entire crew assembled to hear her speak. She had prepared a long speech about duty and sacrifice, but when the moment came, she kept it simple. "We're not going out there to die," she told them. "We're going out there to buy time. Time for 2 million civilians to escape. Time for humanity to survive. Every minute we keep those Zaphiran ships busy is another minute for our people to reach safety. That's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for." The crew responded with a cheer that echoed through the hangar. It was not the desperate cry of doomed soldiers, but the fierce shout of warriors who had found something worth protecting. The night before departure, Chen walked through the ship's corridors. She visited every department, spoke with crew members at their stations, and listened to their concerns. They were afraid, of course, only a fool would not be afraid. But they were also determined. In engineering, she found Chief Martinez fine-tuning the engines one last time. "How are we looking, Miguel?" "Better than we have any right to be," he replied with a grin. "These engines will give you everything they've got and then some. In medical, Dr. Reeves was organizing her supplies with the help of her staff. "Are you ready for this, Sarah?" she asked quietly. Chen considered the question. Was anyone ever ready to die? "I'm ready to do my job. That's all any of us can do." In the weapons bays, the gun crews were running final checks on their equipment. Weapons Officer Kim supervised with his usual attention to detail. "We'll make every shot count, Admiral," he promised. As Chen returned to her quarters for a few hours of sleep, she passed the ship's memorial wall. It held the names of every crew member who had died during the war. Tomorrow, 8,000 more names would be added to memorials across human space. She thought about Emma, probably already aboard an evacuation transport. She thought about the 2 million civilians racing toward the edge of the solar system. She thought about the future of humanity, hanging by a thread that the Indomitable would hold for as long as possible. Chen had spent her entire career preparing for battles. She hoped to win. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, victory would be measured not in enemy ships destroyed, but in time purchased with blood. The Indomitable would make its final jump in 6 hours. After that, there would be no going back. But Chen felt no regret, only a quiet pride in her crew and their mission. They were about to attempt the impossible, and they would do it together. In the morning, she would stand on the bridge and order the jump to Kepler 442. She would face an enemy fleet 300 ships strong with just one vessel and 8,000 brave souls. The odds were impossible, the outcome certain. But Chen smiled as she tried to sleep. The Zaphirians were about to learn something important about humanity. When cornered, when facing extinction, when given no choice but surrender or death, humans chose a third option. They chose to fight. The jump alert echoed through every corridor of the Indomitable. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge, watching her crew prepare for what they all knew would be their final hyperspace jump. The massive dreadnought hummed with energy as its engines built up power for the transition. "All stations report ready, Admiral," Lieutenant Morrison announced from his position at the communications console. Chen nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. In 60 seconds, we will jump to the Kepler 442 system. When we arrive, we will engage the enemy fleet. Remember your training. Remember your duty. Remember that 2 million human lives depend on what we do here today. Admiral out." She turned to the navigation officer. "Lieutenant Park, initiate jump sequence." Jump sequence initiated. 30 seconds to hyperspace transition. Chen looked around the bridge one final time. These men and women had served with her through 3 years of war. They had never failed her, and she knew they would not fail her now. 10 seconds, Park announced. The ship's lights dimmed as all available power fed into the jump engines. Chen felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around them. Jump. Space twisted, folded, and snapped back into place. The Indomitable emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately every alarm on the bridge began to scream. "Contact!" Sensor Officer Williams shouted. "Multiple contacts, Admiral. I'm reading over 300 ships." The main display showed the enemy fleet spread across space like a metal constellation. Zaphirian vessels filled the sensor screen, sleek destroyers, massive cruisers, and at the center, dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Indomitable. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their hull plating gleaming with an oily rainbow sheen that marked their advanced metallurgy. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Morrison. Chen stared at the display. Intelligence had been right about the numbers, but seeing 300 enemy ships with her own eyes was different from reading reports. Each Zaphirian vessel was technologically superior to human ships. Their energy weapons could punch through standard armor like paper. Their shields could absorb punishment that would cripple a human cruiser. "Admiral, we're being scanned," Williams reported. "Multiple targeting sweeps from the enemy fleet." "Are they moving to intercept?" "No, ma'am, they seem to be holding position." "Wait. I'm detecting a communication signal. They're trying to establish contact." Chen had expected this. The Zaphirians always offered surrender terms before battle. It was part of their rigid military protocol. "Put it through." The main screen shifted to show the bridge of a Zaphiran command ship. The alien standing in the center was tall and angular, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he studied the human bridge crew. "I am War Master Kethvar of the Hegemony Third Fleet," the alien said, in perfect English. His voice was cold and mechanical, filtered through a translation device. "You will identify yourselves." "Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the Terran Federation ship Indomitable," Chen replied, keeping her voice steady. "Admiral Chen, you have entered a restricted system with a single vessel. Your fleet strength is insufficient for meaningful resistance. I am authorized to offer surrender terms." Chen almost smiled. Even now, facing impossible odds, the Zaphirians followed their protocols. "I'm listening, War Master." "Immediate surrender of your vessel and crew. You will be processed according to Hegemony standard procedures. Your ship will be added to our fleet. Compliance will result in minimal casualties." Everyone on the bridge knew what Zaphiran standard procedures meant. The aliens had never taken prisoners during the entire war. Surrender meant execution, usually preceded by interrogation about human military capabilities. "I appreciate the offer, War Master," Chen said calmly, "but I'm afraid I'll have to decline." Kethvar's large eyes seemed to focus more intently on Chen. "Admiral, you command one vessel against 317 ships of the line. Resistance is not logical." "You're absolutely right," Chen agreed. "It's not logical at all. But humans aren't known for being logical when our families are threatened." "Explain this statement." Chen thought about Emma, about the evacuation transports, racing toward the edge of human space, about 2 million civilians who needed every minute she could buy them. "War Master, has anyone ever told you about human nature? Your species has been studied extensively. You are emotional, unpredictable, and prone to inefficient decision-making." "That's true," Chen said with a smile. "We're also incredibly stubborn. When someone threatens our children, our homes, our future, we tend to do irrational things, like bringing one ship to fight your entire fleet." Kethvar tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have indicated confusion. "You acknowledge that victory is impossible." "Oh, absolutely, we're going to lose this fight, War Master. But the question isn't whether we'll lose. The question is how much it's going to cost you." For the first time, the alien showed something that might have been surprise. "You intend to fight despite certain defeat?" "Humanity doesn't kneel," Chen said, and her voice carried across the bridge with iron certainty. "We stand, we fight, and we make you remember us." The communication channel fell silent for several seconds. Chen could see Kethvar's bridge crew, other gray-skinned aliens working at stations that pulsed with alien technology. They all seemed to be looking at their commander, waiting for orders. "Admiral Chen," Kethvar said finally, "your species continues to surprise us. I will give you one final opportunity to surrender." "Declined, War Master." "Then you have chosen death." "No," Chen replied. "We've chosen to fight." The transmission ended, and the bridge snapped back to tactical readiness. Chen turned to her crew, who had listened to the exchange with quiet pride. "Weapons Officer Kim, what's our status?" "All weapon systems online and ready, Admiral. Torpedo, tubes loaded, energy capacitors at maximum charge." "Chief Martinez, how are our engines?" The chief engineer's voice came through the communication system from his station deep in the ship. "Engines are running at 110% of rated capacity. We'll have full power for maneuvering and combat." "Excellent. All hands, this is the Admiral. The enemy has declined our generous offer to go home and think about what they've done. We will now proceed to convince them that attacking humanity was a poor life choice. Battle stations." Throughout the ship, 8,000 crew members took their positions. In the weapon bays, loading crews prepared massive shells for the main guns. In engineering, technicians monitored power systems that would soon be pushed beyond their limits. In medical, Dr. Reeves and her staff prepared for casualties. On the bridge, Chen watched the tactical display as the Zaphiran fleet began to move. The alien ships accelerated toward the Indomitable with the smooth precision of a military formation that had conquered dozens of worlds. "Time to weapons range?" Chen asked. 14 minutes at current relative velocity, Sensor Officer, Williams replied. Chen activated the ship's recording system. If they were going to die, their story would at least be preserved for the evacuation transports to carry back to human space. Personal log, Admiral Sarah Chen, Terran Federation ship Indomitable. We have made contact with the main Zaphiran fleet in the Kepler 442 system. Enemy strength is 317 vessels. We have declined surrender and will engage the enemy to buy time for civilian evacuation. If anyone receives this recording, know that we fought with honor and died protecting our people. She paused the recording and opened a private channel to engineering. Miguel, how long can you give me full combat power? Honestly, Sarah, maybe 2 hours before we start burning out primary systems. 3 if we're lucky. That might be enough. It'll have to be. Chen closed the channel and watched the approaching enemy fleet. The Zaphiran ships moved in 3 separate formations, a classic pincer attack designed to surround and overwhelm a single target. Their tactics were sound, their technology superior, their numbers overwhelming. But they had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose. Admiral, Communications Officer Morrison spoke up. We're receiving message recordings from crew members throughout the ship. Personal messages for families and friends. Are they asking for transmission? Yes, ma'am, but they know we won't be able to send them until after. Transmit them now, Chen ordered. All of them. If we're going to die here, our families deserve to hear from us one last time. The communication array began broadcasting thousands of personal messages toward human space. Fathers telling their children to be brave. Mothers sending their love across the void. Friends saying goodbye. Husbands and wives sharing final words of affection. Chen thought about recording her own message to Emma, but decided against it. Her daughter would understand her mother's choice. The job was message enough. 10 minutes to weapons range, Williams announced. The enemy fleet had spread into attack formation. Chen could see their strategy clearly now. The Zaphirians would surround the Indomitable and focus fire from multiple angles until the human ship's defenses collapsed. It was efficient, logical, and would minimize their own casualties. Helm, adjust course. Take us directly toward their center formation. Ma'am? The helmsman looked confused. You heard correctly. We're going to charge straight at them. Admiral, Lieutenant Morrison said carefully. That puts us in the crossfire of all 3 enemy formations. Exactly. Which means they'll have to be careful about their firing solutions to avoid hitting each other. Chen smiled as understanding dawned on her bridge crew. The Zaphirians expected logical tactics, careful maneuvering, and predictable strategies. They were about to learn that desperate humans played by different rules. All hands, prepare for combat. We're going to show these aliens what happens when they threaten Earth. The massive dreadnought adjusted course and accelerated toward the center of the enemy fleet. Behind them, space was empty except for the fading trail of their engines. Ahead, 300 alien ships waited to deliver humanity's final defeat. But Admiral Chen was no longer thinking about defeat. She was thinking about the evacuation, transports that needed time to escape. She was thinking about her crew, who had chosen to follow her into certain death. She was thinking about Emma and 2 million other humans who deserved a chance to live. The Indomitable raced toward the enemy fleet like a spear thrown at the heart of darkness. In 5 minutes, the real fighting would begin. The first Zaphiran energy beam sliced through space where the Indomitable had been a split second before. Admiral Chen gripped her command chair as the massive dreadnought rolled to avoid a second volley from the alien fleet. Return fire, she ordered. The Indomitable's main guns erupted in synchronized fury. 8 massive kinetic rounds streaked across the void, each one carrying enough destructive force to level a city. The nearest Zaphiran destroyer tried to evade, but human targeting computers had anticipated the maneuver. 3 rounds punched through the alien ship's hull, and it exploded in a brilliant flash of escaping atmosphere and plasma. First kill. Confirmed, Weapons Officer Kim shouted from his station. The enemy fleet responded immediately. Dozens of energy beams converged on the Indomitable's position, forcing the great ship to twist and dive like a fighter craft. The dreadnought's thick armor ablated under the concentrated fire, but the ship's redundant systems kept it fighting. Hull breach on Deck 7, damage control reported. Emergency bulkheads are sealed. Chen studied the tactical display. The Zaphiran fleet was trying to surround her ship, but their own formation was working against them. Ships in the outer formations had to be careful not to hit their own vessels when firing at the Indomitable. Helm, bring us about, head for the gap between their second and third formations. Aye, Admiral. The Indomitable changed course with surprising agility for such a massive vessel. Chief Engineer Martinez had somehow coaxed 20% more power from the engines, giving the ship maneuverability that the enemy hadn't expected. Torpedo spread ready, Kim announced. Fire when ready. 20 plasma torpedoes launched from the Indomitable's tubes, spreading out in a wide pattern toward a cluster of Zaphiran cruisers. The alien ships tried to intercept the weapons with point defense fire, but human torpedoes were designed to be difficult targets. 16 of the 20 weapons found their marks. 4 Zaphiran cruisers died in nuclear fire. The explosion sent debris spinning through space, forcing nearby enemy ships to alter course to avoid collision. Enemy formation is breaking up, Sensor, Officer Williams reported. They're having trouble maintaining coordination. Chen nodded grimly. The Zaphiran tactical doctrine emphasized precise formations and overwhelming firepower. But their computer-controlled battle management systems were struggling to adapt to the chaotic close-range fight that the Indomitable had forced on them. Another destroyer closing from starboard. Williams called out. I see it. Kim, put a spread of kinetic rounds into that ship. The Indomitable's secondary guns swiveled to track the approaching destroyer. The alien vessel was firing continuously, its energy beams carving glowing scars across the human ship's armor. But as it closed range, the destroyer's own maneuverability decreased. 6 kinetic rounds struck the Zaphiran ship at almost the same instant. The destroyer's hull cracked like an eggshell, venting atmosphere and bodies into space before the ship's reactor containment failed. That's 6 confirmed kills, Kim announced with satisfaction, but the enemy was learning. Chen watched as the Zaphiran fleet began to adapt its tactics. Instead of trying to maintain formation, individual ships were breaking off to attack from multiple angles. The aliens' superior numbers meant they could afford to lose ships while wearing down the Indomitable's defenses. Admiral, we're taking heavy damage to the port armor sections, reported Lieutenant Morrison. And our missile inventory is down to 60%. Chen did quick mental calculations. At this rate of expenditure, they would run out of ammunition in less than 2 hours. The ship could survive longer than that, but without weapons, their ability to delay the enemy would be severely limited. Chief Martinez, what's our power situation? The chief engineer's voice came through the communication system, barely audible, over the sound of damage control teams working in the background. We're running hot, Admiral, really hot. I can give you maybe another hour at this power level before we start losing primary systems. An idea began to form in Chen's mind. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it might work. Miguel, what would happen if we overloaded the main reactor? Controlled overload, just enough to give us a massive power boost for a few minutes. There was a pause before Martinez responded. Sarah, that's incredibly risky. We could lose containment completely. The whole ship could. I know the risks. Can you do it? Yeah, I can do it. But I'll need to be in the reactor room manually controlling the process. And if something goes wrong, I understand. Prepare for reactor overload on my command. Chen turned back to the tactical display. The Zaphiran fleet was closing in from all sides now, their energy weapons creating a deadly crossfire that the Indomitable couldn't avoid much longer. But if her plan worked, they could turn the tables on the enemy. All hands, this is the Admiral. We're going to try something that's never been attempted before. Hold on to something solid. She opened a private channel to engineering. Miguel, execute reactor overload, now. Deep in the bowels of the Indomitable, Chief Engineer Martinez began the most dangerous procedure of his career. He manually overrode the reactor's safety systems, forcing the fusion containment field to accept more plasma than it was designed to handle. The massive reactor core began to glow like a captive star. Reactor overload initiated, Martinez reported. You've got maybe 10 minutes before I have to shut it down or we all become part of the local star system. Power flowed through the Indomitable like liquid lightning. Every system on the ship surged with energy. The engines howled as they pushed the massive dreadnought to speeds that should have torn the hull apart. The weapons capacitors charged, to levels that made the gun crews nervous. "Kim, give me everything we've got," Chen ordered. The Indomitable erupted in fury. Every weapon on the ship fired simultaneously: main guns, secondary batteries, torpedo tubes, even the point defense systems. The space around the human dreadnought became a storm of kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes, and energy beams. The nearest Zaphiran ships were caught completely off guard. They had been closing for the kill, expecting to overwhelm a damaged and weakening enemy. Instead, they faced a ship that was somehow fighting harder than when the battle began. 3 destroyers and a cruiser died in the first salvo. A second cruiser lost its weapon systems and began tumbling out of control. The Zaphiran formation scattered as ships tried to avoid the unexpected firestorm. "Warmaster Kethvar is attempting to contact us," Morrison reported. "Put him through." The alien commander appeared on the main screen again, but this time his usual calm was cracked. Behind him, Chen could see other Zaphirians working frantically at their stations. "Admiral Chen, what have you done to your ship?" "We've made some modifications," Chen replied with a grim smile. "Do you like them? Your power output is beyond theoretical maximums for human technology. This is not possible. You know, Warmaster, that's the problem with you aliens. You think everything has to follow the rules. Humans have a saying: rules are made to be broken." Kethvar's large black eyes seemed to study Chen with something approaching respect. "You are destroying your own ship to continue fighting. If that's what it takes. This is not logical behavior. We've had this conversation before. Humans aren't logical when it comes to protecting our families." The communication ended abruptly as another Zaphiran cruiser exploded under the Indomitables. Chen watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet tried to reorganize. They had lost nearly 30 ships, and the survivors were struggling to adapt to human unpredictability. But the reactor overload was taking its toll. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits throughout the bridge. The lights flickered as power conduits reached their breaking point. "Admiral," Martinez's voice was strained. "I have to start the shutdown sequence. We're at critical levels. How much more time can you give me?" "Maybe 5 minutes. After that, we lose everything." Chen looked around. Her bridge. Half her crew was wounded, but they remained at their stations. The ship itself was a battered wreck, held together by determination and emergency repairs. But they were still fighting. "Kim, what's our ammunition status?" "Down to 40%, Admiral. But we're making every shot count." The Indomitable continued its deadly dance through the enemy fleet. Chen had abandoned all pretense of tactical doctrine, instead relying on pure aggression and the superior training of her crew. They flew through gaps in the enemy formation that should have been impossible to navigate, emerging to strike where the aliens least expected. Another destroyer on the port side, Williams called out, "Take it." The secondary guns spoke again, and another Zaphiran ship joined the expanding cloud of debris that marked their passage through space. "Admiral," Martinez's voice was urgent now. "I'm starting reactor shutdown. Hold on down there." The power surge ended as suddenly as it had begun. The Indomitable's systems dropped back to normal levels, and Chen felt the ship slow as the engines returned to standard output. But the damage had been done. The enemy fleet was scattered, demoralized, and significantly reduced in number. "Status report," Chen ordered. "We've destroyed 23 enemy vessels," Kim announced with pride. "Damage to at least 15 more. Our own damage?" Lieutenant Morrison consulted his board. "Hull breaches on 7 decks, but all are sealed. We've lost 30% of our armor protection. Casualties are significant." Chen knew better than to ask for specific numbers. Every person aboard had known this was a one-way mission. "Chief Martinez, report. Reactor is back to normal parameters, but we've burned out a lot of secondary systems. I can give you maybe another hour of combat power before we start losing critical functions." Chen studied the tactical display. The Zaphiran fleet was regrouping, but they were being much more cautious now. The easy victory they had expected had turned into a brutal slugging match that was costing them ships and crews. "Admiral," Sensor Officer Williams spoke up, "I'm detecting a priority transmission from the War Master's flagship. Let's hear what he has to say." Kathavar appeared on screen again, but this time his demeanor was different. There was something in his alien features that might have been respect. "Admiral Chen, I must ask you a question." "Go ahead, War Master." "Why do you continue to fight? Your ship is damaged, your weapons depleted, your crew exhausted. You cannot achieve victory." Chen thought about the question for a moment. How could she explain to this logical alien mind what it meant to be human? How could she make him understand the fire that burned in human hearts when everything they loved was threatened? "War Master, let me ask you something. Do you have children?" The alien paused, perhaps surprised by the question. "I have offspring, yes." "What would you do if someone threatened to kill them?" "I would defend them, of course." "Even if the odds were impossible? Even if you knew you couldn't win?" Another pause. "Yes." "Then you understand perfectly why we're still fighting. Every minute we keep you here is another minute for our children to escape. Every ship we destroy is one less ship that might catch our evacuation transports. We're not fighting for victory, War Master. We're fighting for time." The screen showed Kathavar's bridge in the background, where other Zaphirians had stopped their work to listen to the conversation. Chen wondered if any of them had ever heard their commander discuss the protection of offspring with such certainty. "You would die for creatures you will never see again." Without hesitation, Chen replied, "That's what makes us human." Their transmission ended, and Chen turned back to her tactical display. The enemy fleet was moving again, but more carefully now. They had learned to respect the damaged human dreadnought and its stubborn crew. "All hands," Chen announced over the ship's communication system. "We've bought our people 18 hours so far. The evacuation transports are that much closer to safety because of what we've done here. But we're not finished yet. We're going to keep fighting until the last gun goes silent." The cheers that echoed through the ship's corridors were hoarse, but determined. The crew of the Indomitable had stared death in the face and laughed. They would keep laughing until the very end. The Indomitable drifted through space like a wounded giant. Half its engines were dead. Its hull was pocked with holes, and atmosphere leaked from dozens of breaches despite the emergency patches. Admiral Chen stood on a bridge lit only by emergency lighting, watching the damage reports scroll across flickering screens. "Status report," she ordered quietly. Lieutenant Morrison, his uniform torn and blood-stained from helping with damage control, consulted his barely functioning console. "We've lost main propulsion. Maneuvering thrusters only. 40% of our weapons are offline. Life support is failing on decks 4 through 7. Casualties? 4,200 dead. Another 800 wounded." Morrison's voice was steady, but Chen could see the grief in his eyes. Half her crew was gone. Dr. Reeves's voice crackled over the communication system from the medical bay. "Admiral, I'm treating wounded in 6 different emergency stations. We're running low on medical supplies, but we're keeping as many people fighting as we can." Chen nodded and looked at the tactical display. The Zaphiran fleet had pulled back after losing 47 ships to the Indomitable's desperate assault. They now hung at long range, their formation spread wide to prevent the human ship from charging into their midst again. "They're being careful now," Weapons Officer Kim observed. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, but he remained at his station. "They know we can still hurt them." "How much ammunition do we have left?" 18 kinetic rounds for the main guns. 6 torpedoes. Energy weapons are operating at reduced capacity due to power grid damage. Chief Engineer Martinez's voice came through the ship's communication system, hoarse with exhaustion. "Admiral, I've got teams working on the power distribution, but we've lost too many primary conduits. Best I can give you is 60% of normal output." Chen studied the enemy formation. The Zaphirians were methodically positioning themselves for a final assault, moving with the patience of hunters who knew their prey was trapped. They had learned to respect the Indomitable, but they also knew the human ship was dying. "Admiral," Sensor Officer Williams called out. "The enemy fleet is moving again. All ships advancing in line formation." "They're going to finish us off," Kim said grimly. Chen watched the 300 remaining alien ships begin their final approach. The Zaphirians were no longer trying fancy tactics or elegant maneuvers. They were simply going to overwhelm the crippled dreadnought with focused firepower. "All remaining crew to battle stations," Chen announced. "This is our last fight. Make it count." Throughout the ship, the surviving members of the Indomitable's crew took their positions. In the gun bays, loading crews prepared the last rounds for the main weapons. In engineering, Martinez and his teams worked frantically to squeeze every bit of power from the damaged systems. In medical, Dr. Reeves prepared to treat the wounded from what everyone knew would be the final battle. "Admiral," Morrison spoke up, "we're receiving another transmission from War Master Kethvar." "Put it through." The alien commander appeared on the main screen once again. This time there was something different in his bearing. The cold efficiency was still there, but Chen detected what might have been reluctant admiration. "Admiral Chen, your ship is disabled. Your crew is decimated. I am prepared to offer final surrender terms." "What terms would those be, War Master?" "Immediate cessation of hostilities. Your remaining crew will be processed quickly. There will be no torture, no extended interrogation. You have fought with honor." Chen almost smiled at the alien's attempt at mercy. Even now, Kethvar didn't understand that humans didn't surrender when their children were threatened. "I appreciate the offer, War Master, but I'm afraid the answer is still no." "Admiral, you cannot seriously intend to continue fighting. Your ship cannot maneuver. Your weapons are depleted. This is not courage, it is madness." "You know what, War Master? You might be right. Maybe we are crazy, but that's what makes us dangerous." Chen turned to her crew, speaking loud enough for the alien commander to hear. "Did everyone hear that? The War Master thinks we're crazy for continuing to fight." A weak cheer echoed through the bridge, taken up by crew members throughout the ship despite their exhaustion and pain. "War Master," Chen continued, "let me tell you something about humans. When we're cornered, when everything looks hopeless, when logical beings would surrender, that's when we become most dangerous. Because we stop caring about our own survival and start caring only about taking as many enemies with us as possible." Kethvar's large eyes seemed to study Chen intently. "You would sacrifice your remaining crew for no strategic gain." "Oh, but there is strategic gain. Every minute you waste here talking to us is another minute our evacuation transports have to escape. Every ship we destroy is one less ship hunting our civilians. And every alien who survives this battle will remember that humans don't break. Your evacuation transports are beyond our reach now," Kethvar said. "Our long-range scouts report they have escaped the system." Chen felt a moment of pure triumph that she carefully didn't let show on her face. The mission was accomplished. 2 million civilians were safe. Everything else was just details. "Thank you for letting me know, War Master. That makes what happens next much easier." "Explain." "We're no longer fighting to buy time. Now we're fighting because we want to kill as many of you as possible before you kill us." The transmission ended abruptly. Chen turned to her weapons officer. "Kim, target the lead ship in their formation. We're going to make them pay for every meter they advance." The Indomitable's remaining guns swiveled toward the approaching enemy fleet. The great ship could no longer maneuver effectively, but it could still fight. The crew had rigged manual firing solutions for the weapons whose computerized systems had been destroyed. "Incoming fire," Williams shouted. Energy beams from 50 Zaphirian ships converged on the Indomitable. The dreadnought's shields, already weakened by hours of combat, collapsed entirely. The beams carved deep wounds into the ship's armor, punching through to the interior compartments. "Hull breach on Deck 12, Morrison reported. "Emergency. Bulkhead sealed, but we've lost that entire section. Return fire." The Indomitable's main gun spoke for what everyone knew would be among the last times. The massive kinetic round struck a Zaphirian cruiser, punching through its hull and detonating its reactor. The alien ship disappeared in a brief star. Direct hit. Enemy cruiser destroyed. But the enemy fire was relentless. Beam after beam sliced into the human dreadnought, each hit weakening the ship's structure further. Atmosphere vented from new breaches, carrying equipment and sometimes bodies into the vacuum of space. Admiral, Chief Martinez's voice was strained. We've lost primary power to the forward sections. I'm rerouting through secondary conduits, but it's not going to hold for long. How long can you give me, Miguel? Maybe 20 minutes. After that, we'll be dead in space. Chen looked around her bridge. Half the stations were dark, their operators either dead or wounded. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. But her remaining crew stayed at their posts. Admiral, Morrison spoke urgently. Multiple enemy boarding shuttles launching from their fleet. Chen studied the tactical display. The Zaphirians were sending boarding parties to capture the ship instead of simply destroying it. They wanted to study human technology and interrogate survivors. Sound general quarters for repel boarders. All Marines to defensive positions. Lieutenant Commander Torres's voice came through the communication system from the Marine barracks. Marines moving to defensive positions, Admiral. We'll hold them as long as we can. The first Zaphirian boarding shuttles attached to the Indomitable's hull with magnetic clamps. Cutting torches began burning through the armor plating as alien assault troops prepared to enter the ship. Torres, what's your status? First breach, in Cargo Bay 7, Admiral. Marines are in position. We're ready for them. The sound of gunfire began to echo through the ship's corridors as human Marines engaged Zaphirian boarding troops. The aliens were better equipped and individually stronger than humans, but they had never fought desperate humans defending their home. Multiple breaches now, Torres reported between bursts of automatic weapons fire. They're trying to spread us thin, but we're making them pay for every compartment. On the bridge, Chen continued to direct the ship's remaining weapons against the enemy fleet. Each shot was precious now, with ammunition nearly exhausted and power systems failing. Kim, how many rounds left? 8 kinetic shells, Admiral. 3 torpedoes. Make them count. The Indomitable's guns fired again, this time targeting a Zaphirian destroyer that had moved too close to the human ship. The kinetic rounds shattered the alien vessel's hull, sending debris spinning through space. But the boarding action was going badly. Torres's voice came through the communication system again, this time over the sound of close combat. They've taken Deck 5. We're falling back to secondary defensive positions. Chen knew that once the aliens gained control of enough of the ship, they would be able to reach critical systems like engineering and the bridge. The Indomitable's crew was fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. All hands, Chen announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for final defensive measures. Destroy all sensitive equipment and data systems. We don't give them anything they can use against other human ships. Throughout the vessel, crew members began implementing scorched Earth protocols. Computer cores were wiped, weapon systems were sabotaged, and technical manuals were destroyed. If the Zaphirians wanted the ship, they would get an empty shell. Admiral, Dr. Reeves's voice came from the medical bay. They've breached the hospital section. I'm destroying all medical records and research data. Torres, what's your position? Deck 8, Admiral. We've lost half the Marines, but we're still fighting. The aliens seem surprised by our tactics. Chen could imagine why. Zaphirian military doctrine emphasized logical tactics and efficient conquest. They weren't prepared for humans who fought with makeshift weapons, used improvised explosives, and turned every corridor into a killing ground. Chief Martinez, how are you holding up in engineering? We've sealed all the blast doors, Admiral. If they want the reactor, they'll have to fight for it room by room. And if they get too close, I can always overload the containment field. Chen understood the implication. If Martinez was forced to destroy the reactor, it would take out a significant portion of the enemy fleet along with the Indomitable. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Miguel. The ship shuddered as another section lost atmospheric pressure. The Zaphirian boarding troops were advancing methodically through the vessel, but they were paying a heavy price for every compartment they captured. Admiral, Morrison reported, enemy troops have reached Deck 6. They're only 2 levels below the bridge. Chen looked around at her remaining bridge crew. There were only 6 of them left, and half were wounded, but they remained at their stations ready to fight until the end. All right, people. It looks like we're going to have visitors soon. I want all bridge security measures activated. If they want this ship, they're going to have to take it from our cold, dead hands." The sound of combat was getting closer now. Chen could hear the distinctive whine of Zaphiran energy weapons and the answering chatter of human assault rifles. Somewhere in the ship's corridors, the last Marines were making their final stand. "Torres, report." "Deck 7 is lost, Admiral. We're down to 20 Marines falling back to the bridge approaches. We'll hold them as long as we can." Chen activated the ship's final weapon, the self-destruct system. It was the one thing that would prevent the Zaphirians from capturing the ship intact. But she wouldn't use it yet. Every minute they fought was another minute of defiance, another small victory against impossible odds. The Indomitable was dying, but it was dying like a warrior. And in the vast emptiness of space, 2 million human civilians raced toward safety, carrying with them the story of 8,000 souls who had chosen to fight, rather than surrender. The battle was almost over, but the war for humanity's future had just begun. The bridge of the Indomitable shook as Zaphiran assault troops blasted through the final security door. Admiral Chen stood behind the tactical console, her sidearm drawn, watching the smoke clear from the entrance. Behind her, the 5 remaining bridge officers took defensive positions, their weapons trained on the doorway. The first alien trooper to emerge was tall and angular like all Zaphirians, but this one wore the elaborate armor of an elite assault unit. His weapon swept the bridge, searching for targets before his large black eyes focused on Chen. "Admiral Chen," the alien said through his translation device, "you will surrender this vessel immediately." "I don't think so," Chen replied calmly. More Zaphiran troops poured through the breach, their energy weapons glowing with lethal power. Chen counted 12 soldiers, each one equipped with technology that could cut through human armor like paper. But her bridge crew didn't waver. The standoff lasted only seconds before Lieutenant Morrison opened fire. His assault rifle chattered, forcing the aliens to seek cover behind the bridge stations. The Zaphirians returned fire immediately, their energy beams slicing through the air where the humans had been standing moments before. Chen rolled behind the communications console as a beam scorched the air above her head. This was it. The final moment of a battle that had lasted 3 days. She activated her personal communicator one last time. "All remaining crew, this is the Admiral. It has been my honor to serve with you. Remember, we are human. We endure." The firefight on the bridge was brief but vicious. Human weapons cracked against alien energy beams in a deadly symphony. One by one, Chen watched her officers fall. Morrison died trying to protect the navigation station. Kim fell while attempting to destroy the weapons control console. Williams was cut down while transmitting the ship's final log. When the shooting stopped, only Chen remained alive on the bridge. She knelt behind the command console, her sidearm empty, waiting for the end. The Zaphiran assault leader approached, cautiously, his weapon trained on her. "Admiral Chen, you will now cooperate with boarding procedures." Chen looked up at the alien soldier and smiled. "You know what your problem is? You still don't understand humans." Before the Zaphiran could react, Chen pressed the self-destruct authorization sequence she had prepared hours ago. Throughout the ship, emergency alerts began to sound as the Indomitable's computer systems initiated their final protocol. "Warning. Ship self-destruct sequence activated. All personnel evacuate immediately. Detonation in 60 seconds. The alien assault leader's eyes widened in what might have been surprise or fear. "You would destroy your own vessel?" "If that's what it takes to deny it to you, absolutely." Deep in the ship's core, Chief Engineer Martinez heard the self-destruct warning over his communicator. He was alone in the reactor room, the last of his engineering crew having fallen defending the critical systems. The Zaphiran boarding troops were only minutes away from breaching the final blast doors. 30 seconds to detonation, the computer announced. Martinez looked around the reactor chamber that had been his domain for 3 years. These engines had carried the Indomitable across human space, through battles that would be remembered forever. Now they would serve in the ship's final moment of defiance. He began the manual reactor overload procedure, bypassing every safety system the designers had built into the massive fusion plant. If the ship was going to die, it would take as many enemies as possible along with it. On the bridge, Chen watched the countdown on her command console. The Zaphiran assault troops were trying frantically to access the ship's computer systems, but human encryption was holding them back. 15 seconds to detonation. War Master Kethvar's voice suddenly echoed through the bridge communication system. Admiral Chen, order your crew to abort the self-destruct sequence. This destruction serves no purpose. Chen laughed, a sound that carried 3 days of exhaustion, grief, and desperate courage. War Master, you still don't get it. The purpose isn't tactical. The purpose is to show you and every other species in the galaxy that humans don't surrender. Ever. 10 seconds to detonation. The Zaphiran soldiers on the bridge began backing toward the exit, but Chen knew they wouldn't make it. The Indomitable's self-destruct system had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of retreat. 5 seconds. Chen closed her eyes and thought about Emma, probably safe aboard an evacuation transport by now. She thought about the 2 million civilians who would live because 8,000 crew members had chosen to die. She thought about the future of humanity, scattered across the stars but still unbroken. 3, 2, 1. The Indomitable died like a star being born. The massive Dreadnought's reactor core lost containment in a carefully orchestrated cascade, failure that Chief Martinez had spent his final minutes perfecting. The fusion plant didn't simply explode. It created a miniature nova that consumed the ship from within. The blast wave expanded outward at nearly the speed of light, vaporizing everything within a 50-kilometer radius. 12 Zaphiran ships that had moved in close to support the boarding action simply ceased to exist. Another 20 vessels suffered critical damage from the radiation pulse and debris storm. War Master Kethvar watched from his flagship's bridge as the Indomitable became a brief new star in the darkness of space. When the light faded, nothing remained but expanding gas and scattered wreckage. The human dreadnought and its entire crew had vanished in an instant of nuclear fire. Damage report, Kethvar ordered quietly. 32 ships destroyed or critically damaged, his tactical officer replied. Total casualties over 40,000. Personnel. Kethvar stared at the debris field where the Indomitable had made its final stand. In 3 days of fighting, one human ship had destroyed nearly 80 Zaphiran vessels and killed more than 60,000 soldiers. The numbers defied every tactical projection his computers had calculated. Communications, send a message to High Command. The human vessel has been neutralized, but our losses were significant. Shall I report the tactical details, War Master? Kethvar hesitated. How could he explain to the High Command that a single enemy ship had inflicted such damage? How could he describe the human willingness to die rather than surrender? How could he make them understand that these creatures called humans fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness? Include all combat data in the report, he said finally. High Command needs to understand what we're dealing with. The transmission to Zaphiran High Command included complete recordings of Admiral Chen's final communications, detailed analysis of human tactics, and casualty reports that shocked the alien leadership. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, the Zaphirians had encountered a species that preferred death to submission. The impact of the Indomitable's sacrifice rippled outward across known space faster than any starship could travel. Within weeks, news of the battle reached every inhabited system in the galaxy through the vast network of quantum communication relays. On the world of Kepler Prime, the Altarian Council debated whether to resist the approaching Zaphiran fleet or accept conquest. The deciding vote came when Council Leader Vex played Admiral Chen's final transmission. Remember, we are human. We endure. The Altarians chose to fight. In the Vega system, the insectoid hive queens had been preparing to surrender to Zaphiran demands for submission. But the story of 8,000 humans who died rather than kneel changed their collective mind. The hives began preparing for war. On a dozen worlds across the galaxy, species that had been ready to submit to Zaphiran rule suddenly found their courage. The humans had shown that resistance was possible, that even overwhelming enemy superiority could be challenged. But nowhere was the impact greater than among the scattered human survivors themselves. The evacuation transports had successfully escaped the Sol system, carrying 2 million civilians to safety in distant star systems. These ships brought more than just refugees. They carried the story of the Indomitable and its crew. Emma Chen, now 16 years old, stood on the observation deck of the transport ship New Hope as it approached the colony world of Haven. She held a small recording device that contained her mother's final message, transmitted just before the Indomitable's last battle. "Emma," her mother's voice said from the recording, "by the time you hear this, I'll be gone. But I want you to know that everything we did was to give you and your generation a chance to live free. The Zaphirians think they've won, but they're wrong. They've only made us stronger." Around Emma, other refugees listened to their own final messages from loved ones who had died aboard the Indomitable. There were tears, but there was also something else, a burning determination that the aliens had unknowingly created. On Haven, the refugees established the first of many human resistance cells. They began planning for the day when humanity would return to reclaim their lost worlds. They trained in secret, developed new technologies, and most importantly, they remembered. The monument they built in the center of Haven's capital city was simple but powerful. 8,000 names were carved into black stone, with Admiral Sarah Chen's name at the top. Below the names, her final words were etched in letters that would last forever. "We are human, we endure." Years passed. The human refugees spread across dozens of worlds, always moving, always planning, always preparing. They told their children about Earth, about the Indomitable, about the day when 8,000 souls chose death over surrender. The children grew up hearing these stories. They learned that humans didn't kneel, didn't break, didn't surrender when their families were threatened. They learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what was right despite the fear. 20 years after the Battle of Kepler 442, Emma Chen commanded her own ship, a sleek destroyer called Indomitable's Revenge. Around her flew a fleet of human vessels built in secret shipyards and crewed by the children of refugees. They were returning to human space at last. Admiral Chen, her communications officer, reported, "We're receiving surrender demands from the Zaphiran garrison at Alpha Centauri." Emma smiled, thinking of her mother's words from so long ago. "Tell them humanity doesn't negotiate with conquerors. Then prepare to attack." The Second Human War had begun. But the story that mattered most was already written. In the cold vacuum of space where the Indomitable had made its final stand, a small debris field still drifted through the cosmos. Sometimes passing ships would detect faint traces of human metals mixed with alien wreckage. The debris served as a monument to a simple truth that the galaxy had learned the hard way. Humans might lose battles, they might lose worlds, they might even lose wars, but they would never lose the will to fight for what they believed in. The Zaphirians had won the Battle of Kepler 442, but in winning they had lost something far more important. They had created a legend that would inspire resistance across the galaxy for generations to come. And in the end, that legend proved stronger than any weapon, more durable than any ship, and more powerful than any empire. The Indomitable was gone, but its crew had achieved something that would last forever. They had shown the galaxy that humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new, something dangerous, something that would never stop fighting. They were human, and humans endure.